Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. The hair salon, Camellia, in the heart of the capital, has always been popular with clients. They came in torrents, as they knew that the hairdressers cut hair here, though expensive, but always of high quality. Masters were experienced. With experience, went regularly to courses for advanced training and were aware of all the new trends in youth and could easily bring to life the most daring ideas. Alice worked as a part-time intern. She had only recently been hired here at the behest of a good woman. So far, she was only trusted to serve the elderly women and haircut men, and she so wanted to try some intricate youth haircut or coloring to get a hand and sharpen the skills. Alice liked her job very much. She had a talent for it since early childhood. At first she cut the already shabby dolls at the orphanage, for which she was regularly reprimanded by the nurses. And then, when she grew up, she tried to cut her friend's hair with a machine. The second one, with scissors, and it worked. But the staff here was a snake. Two pretentious beauties with whom Alice had to work, Cheryl and Melina, were simply unbearable. Both from wealthy families, and each had several suitors who bought them expensive jewelry, branded goods, and imported cosmetics. As soon as they had a free minute, they immediately began discussing their suitors. In general, gossiped in full force. Women were good professionals, undoubtedly worked long ago with a handful of automatism. Not only that, they were able to unmistakably, by sight, to determine the solvency of the client at the entrance. And if they saw that he came poor, then immediately sent him to Alice, and quietly mocked her. Knowing that he is just him, she will not make anything. From the first day of work, the girl endured their jokes and mockery. They immediately disliked an orphan from an orphanage, believing that such an orphan had no place in a prestigious salon, and harassed her in every way, wanting to get rid of her as soon as possible. After all, she did not like to talk, preferring not to spread about his life and keep his mouth shut. But Alice stood firm, kept silent, and did her job. She could not afford to be so easily offended, turn around and leave, because then she would have nothing to live on. And without proper experience, she would not be hired anywhere else, just like that. So today, almost before the break, Alice made chemistry, another old woman, listening to the endless tirades about how the country and how much medicine in pharmacies now cost. The girl cleaned up after herself, took off her apron, and was about to go out into the fresh air for a bite to eat. Cheryl immediately examined her critically from head to toe and gave her a venomous look. "Where did you dig up such a rare sweater, Alice? Those have not worn for 10 years, that's right. In a second hand or what? Did you get it on sale?" The women laughed, and Melina added, "Watch out, or they'll steal such a miracle in the street." A top model of the 90s, after all. "That's hilarious." Alice became so hurt even tears came to her eyes, and she muttered, "Whatever it is, but her own. Not everyone has rich lovers, and one salary trainee, particularly one, cannot run to buy dresses." Alice, like scalded, jumped out of the salon, bought a bottle of milk and a bun, and sat on a bench in the park to eat. She could, of course, have lunch in the back of the barbershop, but the thought that she would also be teased during the break made her sick. Her appetite was gone, and so was her mood. Inside, seething long accumulated resentment at the intolerable partners. Well, is it her fault after all that she simply cannot afford expensive things and jewelry? Alice threw pieces of bun to pigeons. They gratefully cooed and pecked the treat, and she wiped tears from her eyes and remembered her unhappy childhood. Alice lived with her miserable parents until she was 7 years old in an old wooden hut, which had long needed major repairs and was considered unsafe. Her mother was very beautiful, looking like a famous singer, but she liked to drink. It was her curse. As long as her father was alive, the woman somehow held on, even though he often beat her for drinking like a coward's goat. Daddy adored Alice, called her a sweet candy, and always brought her a present from the bunny. Even if it was a small apple or a plain cookie, her daughter was always happy and gave her daddy a big hug. But when Alice was 5, her daddy was gone. He caught fire in the furnace room at the factory. The girl cried and screamed terribly at the funeral. She longed for her father. After he died, her mother went completely insane. She quit her job as a janitor, got really drunk, and started taking men home. It was hell in there now. The perpetual smell of booze mixed with tobacco smoke, a pile of dirty dishes and leftovers on the table, piles of cockroaches scattered along the walls, and drunken men's faces replacing one another. Many looked at Alice strangely and said, "She's too young. When she grows up, we'll let her go to waste too. She'll be like her mother, working off her debts." Alice was chased out into the street in all kinds of weather, so she wouldn't get in the way of entertainment, and the child would stay in the staircase or with neighbors until late at night, or even into the morning. They took pity on the poor little girl, fed her, saw that the child had become quite neglected and had not washed or dressed dirty for a long time, and there was loud music and swearing mixed with groans and sighs coming from their room until morning. They repeatedly called the precinct officer, tried to reason with the distressed mother, sneezed on her and sneered, but it was all to no avail. She looked at her daughter with cloudy, empty, glassy eyes and shouted angrily, "It was you, you little bastard, arranged everything. You set the neighbors on me, didn't you? Well, then I'm going to teach you. I'll make you sing." And she brought her father's heavy belt over the frightened Alice's head. The girl screamed as hard as she could and tried to placate the closest person. "Mommy, do not. I love you. Don't drink anymore. I want us to live like we used to with Daddy. You were not like that." She got even more heated, shook the baby and yelled, "With Daddy, there is no Daddy anymore. He's dead. He's resting in the damp ground. And what am I supposed to do now? I earn my living the way I do. Don't you dare tell your mother how to live her life. You're your father's copy. You're 2 hairs from a pot, and you go back to telling your mother what to do. You could have killed her." And she raised her hand on Alice, who screamed and covered her hands and begged her not to be touched. The neighbors could not stand it, and this time they called not only the police but also the Child Welfare Service. It was not the right thing for a girl to grow up in such an atmosphere. Otherwise she might grow up to follow in her mother's footsteps. That is how Alice ended up in the orphanage. At first, she was sick and disgusted by those dreary official walls, and completely alien Alice, who had absolutely nothing to do with her. She would sit on the windowsill, put her arms around her head, close her eyes, and remember how good it had been when Daddy was alive. Mommy didn't drink so much, she was cheerful, and Daddy read her fairy tales and made delicious sandwiches with butter and sausage. Alice wanted to go back to that happy time, or at least get through to Mommy's heart and convince her to quit drinking. Child's brain refused to accept the cruel reality. At first her mother came, crying, repenting, promising that she would make it right. Alice still loved her, believed her, and waited for her to take her back. But a couple of days went by, and the woman would go on another binge. Not a trace of her former beauty was left. Now her mother looked like a monster from a horror movie. Wrinkles, puffiness, bags under her eyes, and the absence of her front teeth, knocked out by another suitor, made her look like an old woman in her 60s. Understandably, this could not go on for long. And a year later, Alice was informed that her hapless, dysfunctional mother had died by choking on a shot of vodka. It is difficult to say what Alice experienced at that moment. Everything inside was mixed up. Hatred and resentment against her mother had long been seated in her soul, outweighing her love for her on the scales. They were mixed with pity and remnants of love, so the girl even experienced some relief when she learned that her mother was gone. In the orphanage, strangely enough, Alice was better than once in a cold barrack with cockroaches and drinking mother. At least she was somehow groomed and fed. At first Alice was pestered by the older children, testing the new girl's strength. But the girl was not timid. She grew up on the street and could stand up for herself. Alice had a keen sense of justice, and she could easily kick even the boys. Maria, an older kindergarten teacher, had taken it upon herself to look after her. Curious and smart girl really liked it. She on the fly grabbed examples of mathematics and read fluently, though it is no one obviously taught it. The woman took care of the girl in everything, did not give offense, and taught her life. She even wanted to adopt Alice because her son had long grown up and lived very far away, but her husband flatly refused the idea. He was afraid that the girl was from a dysfunctional family, which means that she has bad blood, and there would be problems. The good news was that she would grow up and follow in the footsteps of her good-for-nothing mother, or that she would bring a baby in the hem. So her husband gave her an ultimatum, either he or her adopted daughter. Ruin established routine, and the family teacher did not dare, so I had to give up the idea to adopt. But all the same, she loved Alice in a special way and spent a lot of time with her. It was Maria who first noticed the child's inclination for haircuts and her natural talents for this business. While Nishirochki were scolding Alice when she saw another shortcut doll, the tutor suddenly took it in her hands and examined it carefully. She noticed that the little girl is not just chaotically cut off the doll's hair to play around and tried to imitate exactly a haircut. So the woman brought a machine to the shelter, bought special scissors, and persuaded a couple of boys to trust her and act as her subject. Alice was not confused and with zeal went to work. Puffed long, tried, finally satisfied with herself, said, "That's it. It's done. Samiektov, I hope you like it and you will not kill me." And when the teacher saw the result, then all aghast, "Alice, my girl, how well done you are. Vladik's haircut is just great. Where did you learn to make such a smooth transition?" "Philip bangs." The girl just shrugged her shoulders. "Well, I watch a lot of videos on the internet, how to cut, and it somehow turns out by itself. I like it." Since that day, the girl had no shortage of clients at the shelter. She cut hair not only for the boys, but also for some of the girls, and life was easier. Everyone tried to thank her and shoveled him a little money, and something tasty, and the boys stopped bothering her, respected her. Yes, and the girls Alice also, to the utmost experimented, did them intricate hairstyles, bangs trimmed. After graduation, it was Maria knocked out for Alice's warm place, not somewhere but in the prestigious salon. She admonished her one last time. "At first you keep your mouth shut, study, absorb everything. Don't you dare to cross anyone. Such wealthy people go there. You'll always have money when you gain experience. You'll remember me with good words. They speak well of the director. He's not an autocrat. So come on, go for it, hold on to this place with your hands and feet. That's it, sweetie. Goodbye. I wish you happiness. Don't forget me. Don't be a stranger." The director of the salon, John, was a man of means and riches, but fair. He had no problem taking an orphan as an apprentice, so he let her learn and practice. Frankly, he liked the girl, quiet, modest, with sad and beautiful big sky, blue eyes. She dressed discreetly, almost without makeup, and had long blonde curls of her own, which she always tied in a ponytail at the back of her head. He could see, of course, how Cheryl and Melina were mocking the new girl, for the cameras were in the hall, and the landlord watched them regularly to assess the level of service and the work of the staff. But for now, he decided not to interfere and wait. He wondered how long the trainee would endure and how she would react. Alice drank her milk with the rest of the bun, sighed bitterly, and wandered off to work. She just finished haircutting the next client when the cabin entered a small, poorly dressed, bright red-haired girl. She was as sunny as the sun, her face all covered with large bumps and long red curls scattered below the shoulder blades. The baby looked like a cute little angel. You couldn't take your eyes away. The baby came first to Cheryl, then to Melina, and pointing at the picture she was holding in her hand, asked the same question. "Auntie, will you give me the same haircut as the deceased's mother in the picture? I beg you. I really need it." Dodgy girls immediately realized that the girl obviously do not have money, overly poorly dressed, so they turned her down and pointed their fingers at Alice, who was just sweeping the floor. See over there? She will cut your hair. But we have no time. A lot of customers, all by appointment. Chickens rubbed their hands maliciously. They knew that the girl will not pay, and the trainee had no money. Yesterday she tried to borrow 200 rubles before her paycheck. How is she going to get out of it? Money to the cashier, no matter how you want it, but we'll have to put it. The little girl happily ran up to Alice and handed her a photo. Auntie, can you make me a haircut like my mother's in the photo? She died a long time ago when I was born, and everyone teases me, Fiona's a cracker, because my hair is frizzy and sticks out in different directions. I can't braid it beautifully myself yet, and my grandmother is old and her hands hurt. So I want to go to school and cut my hair like my mother. It's very important to me, in memory of her. Look, isn't she beautiful? The master looked at the photo. Indeed, the child was almost like two peas in a pod. The same smile, eyes, and the oval of her face. She suddenly remembered her beautiful and so unhappy late mother, and it was so exciting and disturbing. How terrible it is to lose loved ones, to see their suffering and not be able to hug, cuddle, talk to them. Because the person is gone and never will be. Alice felt very sorry for the poor girl because she herself was an orphan. Just my heart ached, so she smiled at her friendly and invited her into the chair. Sit down, Fiona. Let's try to do your hair the same way. Your mom is really beautiful. You're right. You look a lot like her. Hairstyle of the woman from the photo was very difficult in execution and intricate. It's not grandmother's to cut it into a haircut. And for Alice, it was also a professional challenge. She wondered if she could replicate the hairstyle or not. Melina and Cheryl were indignant when they saw Alice put the little girl in a chair. Wow, what a fool. The girl obviously won't pay. She'll get a beating from the owner. You'll see. How is she going to pay for that redhead? Alice, meanwhile, was cutting the child's hair and asked her carefully, "Why did you come alone? Where do you live? Isn't your grandmother afraid to let you go alone? There is such a busy highway here. The cars are flying," the little girl answered quietly. "I don't have anyone to walk with." "No, Mommy, but I have a stepfather, Uncle Frank. I ran away from him a long time ago when I was very young. I couldn't live with him. He drinks a lot, and he yells at me, calls me red-headed devil spawn. I live with my grandmother now. Her name is Lida. She's very nice and kind, but she's very old. She's 78 years old. She gets sick a lot. I feel sorry for her. If she dies too, then they will definitely take me to the orphanage, and I don't want to go there. So I try to help my grandmother in everything. I know how to cook potatoes and eggs, and even fry pancakes myself. I'm going to get a haircut like my mom and become the prettiest girl in my class. All the girls will be envious." The girl's hair was docile and easygoing, and soon Alice was able to exactly replicate the masterpiece from the photo. The haircut suited the girl amazingly, as well as a short, ragged, oblique bangs. Alice even admired her work. Fiona loved it too. "Thank you very much. It was just like at Mom's." "Well, look at that." At that moment, the owner came to the hairdressers. He had to check the reports. The poisonous housewives jumped up to him and started whispering, "John, Ludka, the new girl. She's got some nerve. She's giving the girl a free haircut. And she doesn't have any money. What's wrong with that? Do we have to pay for her? You'd better take action." Melina and Cheryl giggled sneeringly after doing their dirty work, anticipating what kind of scolding the warden was going to give to the new girl, and prepared to watch the show with their eyes wide open. But John decided not to cut off his shoulders, and first to sort everything out. He came to Alice's chair, saw a happy red-haired girl with a fashionable haircut, and could not take his eyes off her. She reminded him of someone very close to him, and everything was turned upside down in his soul. She was like two peas in a pod, like a very dear to his heart woman from his distant past. The man nevertheless asked the trainee sternly, "Alice, what's going on here? The girls say you cut your hair for free now. This is no good. We'll go to the world that way." Alice sighed and put her head down. "It's my fault, John. I don't deny it, but I felt so sorry for the little girl. Fiona's mother died and she wanted to get a haircut like this in memory of her. I'll put it back with my paycheck, I promise." The little girl took a mountain of change out of her pocket and spilled it on the table. "Don't scold your aunt, please. She's nice. Here, the money. It took me a long time to collect it. Well, look how well she cut my hair. A copy of my mother's hair. I like it very much. What about you?" The director took the picture in his hands and pale as chalk. His forehead was covered with cold sweat. He blotted it nervously with his handkerchief and whispered, as if in a delirium, "It can't be. Betty, my darling. So many years have passed. I found something about you unbelievable." He stared at Fiona, then at her mother's picture, stunned, and repeated, "Fiona, how old are you? How old are you? How old are you? How long has your mother been dead? Where do you live? It's important for me to know. Answer, please." Surprised by this reaction, the little girl answered, "I'm 7 years old now. I'm going to school. My mother died a long time ago. It's true her name was Betty. I live nearby, 8 Mira Street, with my grandmother. Why? Did you know my mother?" "Yes." "So you're not going to scold your aunt?" "Because I have to go. I have to run. My grandmother will be worried that I am gone for so long." John said, thinking about something of his own, "I will not scold anyone. Run and take the change. Will come in handy. Can I come and visit you soon? I need to talk to your grandmother. Can you send her away?" The little girl laughed. "No, of course, come. I'll treat you to tea and bagels. We rarely get visitors, so I'm always happy to have them. Thank you, my haircut is just great." And she cheerfully rushed home. Alice did not understand anything at all. What was going on at all? She kept looking at her boss, as if he was in prostration, and went somewhere deep into his memories. Suddenly John, as if shaking off his thoughts, told her seriously, "Alice, can you help me? Let's go to Fiona's house. I really need it. But before I do, I want to tell you something, so that you can understand how I know her mother." Shaken, Alice nodded her head and replied, "Okay, as you say. Right now or go after work? May I ask why you decided to trust me?" John answered firmly, "Right now, why wait? I have to find out. Who else can I trust around here? Those 2 gossipy girls. So the whole town would know all the secrets. Oh no, I've been after you for a long time, Alice. I think you're a good and honest man, and you're obviously not chatty. Come on, let's get changed. Let's go." Melina and Cheryl, dumbfounded, saw the owner almost run out of the salon on the arm of this newcomer and immediately began to wash her bones. "Yes, we underestimated the orphan. She was smarter than all of us. She pretended to be a poor sheep and took our boss down. What a bitch. You'd never know it, she looked so modest." When Alice and John got in the car, he said, "Listen to what I have to say, then tell me what you think. Am I right or am I wrong? It was a long time ago. I was in my last year at university. Like all normal students, I liked to go to the disco or dancing in the park at weekends. One day, I was coming home and noticed that 2 drunken guys were bothering a girl who was crying and asking them not to touch her. So I stood up and defended her honor, so to speak. I punched the offenders in the face and they scattered away. That was my Betty. I fell in love with this red-haired wonder from the first minute. Her pretty little face, with its little upturned nose, was streaked with freckles, and her mop of red hair reached to her shoulder blades. The bride was from a simple, even poor family, She was brought up by her mother alone, lived modestly. They could barely make ends meet. There was no money for university, so she studied at a college as a seamstress sewer. Between us, there was an immediate spark that ran. There was a crazy mutual attraction. The romance spun with breakneck speed. I was encouraged by the fact that I was Betty's first man, which meant that she was not a promiscuous, decent girl. We had been dating for about 6 months, and we decided it was time to tell our parents and get married. We were sure of our feelings for each other. We were already making far-reaching plans to have children and grow old together. It seemed to me like that was how it was going to be. I invited my fiancée to my house, happily announced to my parents that I intended to get married. My bride was already very worried, but she didn't lie. She honestly told me where she lived and where she studied, but my parents reacted very strongly. Even I did not expect that. My father and mother did not share my joy at all. My mother ridiculed Betty harshly, calling her a pauper, and I remember her yelling, verbatim, "What? You meet a rich guy and decide to grab him with your teeth? You think you got your lucky ticket?" No, she didn't. We don't want such a daughter-in-law. We don't want such a daughter-in-law without money or a proper education. I can't tell my friends that my daughter-in-law graduated from a vocational school. A seamstress in a factory. It's a disgrace. Beatty cried and ran away, shouting that she would never set foot in my house again. I went to catch up with her and calm her down. We both knew that after such a stunning scandal, improved relations with my parents are unlikely to succeed. But I didn't leave my fiancée. We started to rent an apartment and live together. Except that I was a student and I was mastering the basics of business until I had my own steady income. My father spitefully blocked all my cards and gave me an ultimatum. Either I return home alone or he no longer finances me. If you want to start a family, you're on your own. Betty also did not sit idle. She sewed at home, took orders. I worked part-time courier. In general, somehow survived. Still, we barely had enough money to pay rent and food, and there were no other expenses to speak of. But for me, after a well-fed and affluent life of a rich man, it all seemed like a trial, a nightmare, not a life. I'm used to wearing only branded clothing, if perfume then French, and watches. So Rolex, and I gradually became more and more annoyed with my and Betty modest family life, although I still loved her a lot. That day, my mother called me and said she invites me to visit. They're coming important people, my father's colleagues, and I must attend. She hinted that it would be better if I came alone. Betty, however, would not go. I dressed up, gave my beloved a kiss, said I wouldn't be late, and left. The evening passed dull and monotonous, talking about partnership and business. Except that the daughter of a foreign partner, Anna, did not take her eyes off me the whole time. She was very beautiful, well-groomed. There was nothing to complain about. But I loved Betty, and I didn't pay any attention to the visiting guest. Everyone started to go away, and Anna suddenly asked me, "John, would you mind taking me to my hotel? I've been driving recently, and I've had too much to drink, and I don't want to drive. I'd really like to have a chat with someone my own age and relax a bit, because my father's been boring me with all his chatter about work." I suspected absolutely nothing. The usual friendly conversation. We went into her suite, and Anna uncorked a bottle of Cabernet in front of me, poured into 2 glasses, and said, well, John, shall we toast? To Bruderschaft." We drank, and then some more, and then some more. Then she opened the whiskey, and that's the last thing I remember. The ground started spinning, my eyes went black. I woke up in the same bed with Anna, and I jumped up like a maniac. How come? I didn't mean to. What should I do now? My head hurt like hell, and the girl laughed brazenly in my eyes. "Do you think you'll lie to your fiancé?" It's too late to think about that. She was on the phone half the night, not letting me sleep. I had to pick up the phone and explain that you're a little busy. She didn't believe me, so I sent her a couple of pictures of you and me. "You don't mind, do you, honey?" Look how great we look together. It's adorable. I yelled like crazy. How could you? Why would you do that? Betty and I love each other, and this is all some ridiculous mistake. I know you put something in my wine. I couldn't just pass out like that. This is ridiculous. Anna didn't raise an eyebrow. She just replied, I think the subject of your fiancée seamstress is closed forever. You're my fiancée now. That's what my father and I decided, and yours only supported it. Our companies are merging soon, and you're going to be the CEO. So think about it. What's more important to you? A life of misery with Betty and no prospects, or an exciting career in a posh high society bride? I only know 4 languages. I've graduated from 2 universities. Get dressed, baby. It's time for you to go. I need to get some sleep, and you're wrong about spiking. I don't do that. It's not my level. I just skillfully mixed the drinks you drank during the evening. The wine was the final point. Tonight is an important negotiation, and I have to look stunning. I rushed to my and my fiancé's apartment like a madman. But of course, neither Betty nor her stuff was there. I cut off the phone and begged her to listen to me. But Betty just answered that I had betrayed her and hung up. Then I caught up with her outside the school and grabbed her by the arms. Betty, sweetheart, let's talk, please. It's all a mistake. I didn't mean to. The bride sobbed, slapped me in the face, and said, What didn't you want? Sleeping with another girl. She sent me a bunch of pictures, so you spent hours together. Not only that, she said, it's all settled, and you're together now. And you love her. How could you? I trusted you. I thought we were serious. Well, of course, who is she and who am I? Go away, John. I can't see you. You're hurting me. So we broke up stupidly. And I put up with it, didn't fight for Bethy, though I'm sure if we'd talked again after a while, we'd probably have made up. But I chose to go with the flow and not oppose the will of my parents to make a dizzying career, and made it, I must say, very successful. I have a network of hairdressing and beauty salons, as well as running a modeling agency. Except that all this did not bring me happiness even a little bit. Anna and I got married, lived for 3 years, and divorced by mutual consent because, in fact, from the beginning, we were strangers to each other, and we both knew it. She was luckier. Anna found her love abroad, and even had a baby boy, and I still live alone. There are, of course, occasional romances in my life, but that's not it. Betty is forever in my heart. If you only knew how sick I was of coming to an empty apartment at night and living all alone. My parents died a long time ago. There are few real friends, and they have long ago acquired families and children. It seems to be well provided for. I can afford almost everything except one thing: to be happy. Alice was taken aback. Yes, it's really... And why didn't you try to find her later? John was silent for a long time, then answered, You asked the right question. I thought about it a lot myself. I just didn't want to spoil her life. She's probably married. She's got her own family. She's got her own family. She's got kids. And then out of the blue, I show up. And today, when I saw her picture in the hands of that red-haired little girl, I was just like an electric shock. It brought back memories right to the point of tears. And I thought, what if Fiona is my daughter? She's 7 years old, which is how long ago we split up. So I thought I'd go over to her house and find out. What do you think? Am I doing the right thing? Should I do the right thing? Should I do it or not? Because I'm having second thoughts. I think Betty's mother won't be happy to see me, and she might not even want to talk to me. Alice replies sincerely, You're doing the right thing, John. After all, if Fiona really is your daughter, you must surely help the girl. You can see that they live very poor. I like the little girl myself. She is such a spontaneous and wonderful child. The main thing is to be sincere, and then we will see. Let's just go to the supermarket. I want to please the baby goodies. I don't have much money, but enough for a chocolate bar and a couple of apples." The man looked at her in a different way and thought, "Well, it turns out that there are still such sincere and kind people on Fiona. I'd give anything, even though my own finances are a little tight. And those two money-hungry hens, Melina and Cheryl, don't know what trinkets to put around their necks." They bought a whole bag of food. And drove to the address the girl had given them. Immediately there was the stomping of little feet, and Fiona opened the door for them. "Oh, hello. You're here after all. Please come in. Grandmother is in the room. You two talk, and I'll make some tea." John went into the kitchen, put a bag of food on the chair, and said fondly to Fiona, "This is for you and your grandmother. You sort it out for now, from the bottom of your heart." The little girl was very pleased. She hadn't eaten such delicacies for a long time. She thanked her guest and began to lay everything out skillfully. She looked with interest at the whole package with kinder surprises, delicious cookies and chocolate cake. The guest seemed to her to be some kind of good wizard, because there is no such thing. The bedroom was clean but poor. There was only one bed, a nightstand, a chair, and a cot in the corner where the baby probably slept. It smelled of medicine. In the bed lay a gaunt old woman. Beside it stood a stick. When she saw the guests enter, she fussed and groaned, "Oh, good afternoon. Are you here to see me? Fiona? Why didn't you tell me we had guests? I'm not feeling well at all, with arthritis and blood pressure. I'm sick with these things. It's a nasty thing about being old. You must be from social services." About the benefit? John exhaled, pulled himself together, and began a difficult conversation. "No, we're not from social services. My name is John. I'm the owner of a chain of barbershops and salons. And this is Alyssa, my handyman. Fiona came to see her today, asking for a haircut, and she was holding a picture of her mother. I happened to see it. I almost lost my mind. It's my first and greatest love, Betty. We used to date for a long time and were even going to get married. And then I was stupid enough to break up with her. I regretted it 100 times. I couldn't get over Betty, but I'm an idiot for some reason. I never went looking for her before. Fiona said her mother was dead and she was 7 years old. So I thought maybe the girl was my daughter. If so, I'll take care of her. I won't leave her alone. Tell me everything you know about Betty's life. Why and how did she die? What happened?" The older woman's face changed. Tears came to her eyes. "Ah, so that's what you are, you parasite. Why did you, you son of a bitch, betray Betty at such a difficult time in her life? Didn't you help her? You've been baiting a rich girl. If you knew how my daughter suffered, how she cried. After all, she only loved you. All at once it all fell on her. And don't worry, Fiona's not your daughter. So you won't have to pay alimony. Oh, I'm mad at you, even though it's been a long time. If you'd been in hot water, I'd have torn your legs off and not even blinked. You twisted my girl's whole fate. Vitally wanted to fall under the ground, because his grandmother was right about everything. He lowered his eyes and fell silent, not knowing what to say next. Hanged oppressive pause. Alice decided to smooth things over. Let's all just calm down. Megan, we came here in good faith, so now we have to dwell on the past. All men are sinners. Fiona is such a wonderful girl. She looks just like her dead mother. I've only seen her once in my life, and she's really stuck with me. Tell me about your daughter and granddaughter, please." The old woman sighed and began her story. That very night, when this groom with another man's woman was tumbling, and Betty called all the morgues and hospitals, a misfortune happened. Our house burned down, burned to the ground. The wiring shorted out. It was so important to Beatty that the man she loved supported her, comforted her, helped her, Instead, the same girl picked up the phone and sent her pictures. My daughter showed them to me. It was such a betrayal for her. She could not forgive me. My friends took us in for the first time, but we needed a place to live, didn't we? My daughter came across that unfortunate ad about surrogacy. She grasped at it like a straw. After all, we were denied a mortgage on our new home. How I tried to talk her out of it. How I begged her not to do it. I felt my mother's heart was telling her it would not end well. But my daughter insisted. People are very decent, well-to-do, childless, married couple of businessmen. They promised to pay so much that just enough for a new house, and the loan will not have to take. Mom, this is such an opportunity. Why not help them become parents? I told her. Daughter, believe me, after carrying a child inside you for 9 months, you just can't leave him like this. And it doesn't matter who his mother or father is. You'll think of it as your own. Anyway, Betty got pregnant safely. Everything was going fine. Those people gave a good deposit. But the closer she got to the birth, the more complicated the situation became. The baby's parents disappeared and stopped contacting me at all. Betty was sobbing and didn't know what to do, where to run. After all, there was no official contract. Everything was just words. She wept day and night, Mama, what a fool I am. Apparently they did not need a child. They changed their mind and changed the phone number. What to do now? I really do love the baby. And so no roof over his head, and now even one with a baby in his arms will stay. Why didn't I listen to you? The labor turned out to be hard. It started bleeding a lot, and my daughter died right in the delivery room. It was hell for me, a nightmare. I couldn't understand that my little girl was gone. I was offered to give up my granddaughter because of her age and the fact that she was a stranger's child. But I took her in my arms, and I realized at once. She was mine. Period. The same red-haired like the sun. Betty had tried to live with another man before she was pregnant, despite the man who had left her. But nothing good came of it. Frank can't stand Fiona either. He resents her. I'll never give her to him. So it's just me and my granddaughter. The state gave us this room as firemen. It's hard for me, of course, and my age is advanced. I'm afraid that I will not have time to put my granddaughter on her feet. My pension is a penny. The allowance is in and out. But despite all of this, I do not regret for a second that I took my granddaughter to myself. She is such a clever girl, my light in the window. She is only 7, and she does everything around the house like an adult. Our neighbors are good. They help in any way they can. That's the way it is. John was shocked. Poor Betty. What a cruel and ridiculous fate and death. If it had not been for his betrayal, things might have turned out very differently. He took the woman's hand in his emotion. Forgive me, Megan. I'm so sorry for the way things turned out. You can't take it back. I never had a life either. I've never been able to love anybody but Betty. I only have 2 requests. Can you tell me where Betty's grave is? I want to visit her and ask her forgiveness. I want a proper memorial for her. And may I come and visit? Help out financially. Please don't say no. It's very important to me. Megan softened, her eyes moistening. I see you're not lying now. You're sincere. Buried Betty in the cemetery. If you could put up a monument, I'd appreciate it. I ain't got the money for that. And I wouldn't refuse to help. My granddaughter is going to school soon, and I'd like to dress her in a modern way and buy her a nice briefcase. So she won't be worse than the other kids. And the poor girl walks, all the things from someone else's shoulder. What kind neighbors give her after their children, she still wears. They said a heartfelt goodbye and left. From that day on, the lives of all the heroes of the story changed greatly. John and Alice began to visit Fiona and her grandmother every weekend. They took her to McDonald's and Disneyland. The child was just happy. They bought new school uniforms, lots of fancy clothes, and a cool pink briefcase with teddy bears. Sometimes John took the girl to his house, and the three of them enjoyed playing, reading fairy tales, and watching children's movies. Megan wasn't forgotten about either. The woman was examined and treated, and she felt a little better. The businessman conducted his own investigation, enlisted the help of acquaintances from the police, and learned by name where Fiona's biological parents had disappeared to. It turned out that they were not scoundrels or scoundrels of any kind at all, and had not brazenly abandoned the surrogate mother. Shortly before the birth, they both died of a viral disease. That's why everything turned out so tragically. Realizing that apart from her grandmother, Lydia Grigorievna, Fiona had no one at all, the man thought hard about the girl's fate. After all, her grandmother is already old, very sick, and can barely walk. And what will happen to Fiona if something irreparable happens and, God forbid, she dies? She would be sent to a foster home, and he couldn't let that happen. To him, Fiona was not only a sweet child he had grown to love, but a living memory of his beloved Beatty. She was just like her, and every time he looked at her, John felt so good and warm in his heart that he wanted to hold her tightly and never let her go. At the hairdresser's shop Camellia, everything changed drastically too. John called everyone to an emergency meeting, and after resolving all issues, solemnly announced, "Yes, and from this day on, we have a big change. My right hand and senior in the barbershop, I appoint Alice Short. Love and respect. Everyone listen to her and contact her with any questions. Thank you, everyone." Dismissed. Melina and Cheryl almost jumped out of their fancy pants with envy. They were just torn apart. They were just torn apart. They were clucking like hens on a roost. Look at that smart little orphan girl. And we were making fun of her. The trainee was 100 times smarter than us. Quickly glued to the owner, and she became a manager herself. Alice was shocked at the turn of events. She babbled, "John, come on. Another long working, not much experience. What if I do not cope?" But the man answered firmly, "Alice, experience. It is a gain. You will gain more. I realize the main thing. You are an honest and incorruptible person, fair and open. And these are the qualities that I want to see in my assistant. So go ahead and be firm with them. Because these women are always talking over and over and discussing new things." From that day on, there was no more mocking, no more teasing. Melina and Cheryl tried to fawn over and oblige Alice to keep her happy. The girl quickly got the hang of it, for now she could choose her own clients and would take on the most complicated hairstyles. She was not afraid to experiment. She did toning and colored, and her clients liked it. Alice decided to expand, and now she did manicures, pedicures, and facial massages. Clients came at once. Many women liked to come to one place and get a set of services at once. John quietly kept an eye on Alice and was amazed at her optimism, persistence, and determination. Outwardly, the girl was also greatly transformed. Now the level of her salary allowed her to finally buy a really fashionable and high-quality clothes, get a manicure and change her hair, and without that pretty girl, just turned into a stunning beauty. Managed hairdresser girl, also competently. For a good job, she paid bonuses, and for the negligence and could punish. Constantly arranged the shares, new items and discounts for seniors, and the number of customers has increased at times. Now Melina and Cheryl had no time to talk and gossip. They worked hard to talk and gossip. They worked hard not to lose their bonuses. John spent almost all his time with Alice in one way or another, either for work or to take care of Fiona. They became so close that they consulted and trusted each other with any secrets. One day, sitting over a cup of coffee in Nobalis as the girl concentrates assembling complex puzzles, John said, "You know, Alice, I want to talk to Megan and become a guardian for Fiona, or even adopt her for real. I've grown so fond of that red-haired princess that I can't imagine life without her anymore." Alice supported the man. "You read my mind. I thought the same thing many times, but I'm afraid they won't let me do it. I heard you need to have a full family and a stable financial situation. housing, and then you can count on the fact that the documents will be able to arrange everything. But the most important thing is Fiona's own will. And her grandmother's too. You need to talk to both of them and ask them if they want it. It's one thing for a granddaughter to visit the good Alicias on weekends, and it's quite another to give them a child for good, you know. Not everyone would dare to do that. I mean, we're relatively new. And the couple decided to have a frank conversation with the girl's grandmother. John was the first to start. Megan, we have something important to talk to you about. Fiona's fate depends on its outcome. I'm very fond of her. No, not so. Alice and I are very fond of her. She is a lovely, sweet girl. I have every opportunity to raise her as a happy child, to give her a good education, to bring her out into the world. In general, I want to become Fiona's guardian or adopt her. But of course, this is only possible if you agree and sign all the documents. You do realize that because of her age, you may not have time to raise your granddaughter, and if she ends up in an orphanage, it would be much harder to adopt her. And the child would be in a bad place. I'm not going to separate her from you or anything like that. No, it'll be the same as before. It's just so I'll have peace of mind for her future. Fiona isn't just an ordinary child to me. She's a piece of Yulechka, and she's very dear to me. Raising a little girl with dignity is the least I can do in memory of my first and brightest love. Alice was supportive. I know firsthand that life in an orphanage is not sugar, and that there is no place on earth more terrible, especially for children from wealthy families. I would adopt Fiona myself, but I'm afraid I won't get it. You have a lot of good connections and an opportunity. Megan hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes, and then she answered quietly, 5 years ago, I would have chased you out of here and not one step closer to my granddaughter, especially my late daughter's fiancé. I can see that he's changed, but I still don't trust him. But now I realize that I've given up, and the sicknesses are getting closer and closer. I'm afraid I really won't have time to get Fiona back on her feet. I've thought about it many times myself and wondered what would happen to her if I fell ill. She's just a little girl. I see how much you are doing for her, how much you care for her, and I understand that she will not be lost with you. My answer is, I agree, but only if the girl lives with both of you. I like Elisa. She's responsible and serious. She'll be a good mother, and I feel safer this way. But you still need to talk to your granddaughter. This is the most important thing. If she refuses, then I will not agree. The most important thing for me is that she feels good. You can't deceive a child. He subconsciously senses falsity and will never touch a bad person. John and Alice looked at each other and nodded their heads in agreement. The grandmother brought her granddaughter in and asked her directly, Granddaughter, I am getting old. You can see it yourself. I am sick more and more often, and I alone do not have enough time to put you on your feet. If something happens to me, they'll send you to an orphanage. That's my greatest fear. John offers to adopt you, Fiona, or become your guardian. That way, I'd be safe for you. How would you feel about that? Are you happy with him? Do you agree? Fiona was taken aback, blinked rapidly, and suddenly burst into tears. Tears rolled in large hail from her eyes. She ran to her grandmother and hugged her tightly. Don't say that, Grandma. I don't want anything to happen to you. I love you so much. I agree that Aunt Alice is my mother. She is very good. And Uncle John is my father. But I will not leave you too. You're the closest thing I have to family. I don't want to be without you. And she burst into bitter tears again. Megan also cried. She was so happy that her granddaughter loved her so much and sincerely. She hugged her granddaughter, soothing her, and ran her fingers through her red curls. John thought for a moment, and then answered the girl, Fiona, I understand what you want us all to live together as a family, don't you? And Grandma was always there for you, right? The little girl happily ran up to him, climbed on his lap. Yes, that's right. It's my fondest dream. Then I would be the happiest. I love you and Mama Alice and Grandma, and I can't share you." The man pressed her tighter and kissed the redhead. "What a clever you have. You're wiser than all of us. And this is a very good idea. I'll sell my apartment and buy a mansion in the country. There's nature, clean air, and we'll all live together. Everyone will have his own room. And it will be good for Grandma. We can sow some seed beds, so it won't be boring. And the city is not far. 20 minutes by car. So do you all agree? Frankly speaking, I've always dreamt of having a big family, so my wishes come true." Everyone agreed immediately, especially Megan, who was happy about it. She didn't want to be alone in an empty room in her old age with her loneliness and sicknesses. It really scared her, and being part of a big family and still living with her granddaughter, seeing her every day, and still not worrying about her future was the best solution. As John and Alice got into the car, the girl asked anxiously, "Did you mean what you just said? You mean we are going to live together as husband and wife? But you never said you were in love. You never asked me to marry you. And now this, I don't know. It's all so strange." John did not let her finish talking and began to passionately and greedily kiss her on the lips. Alice floated and responded to the kiss. Her head was spinning and her heart was about to jump out of her chest. They caught their breath, and the man, not letting her regain her senses, began to whisper, "I'm an idiot. You're right, for keeping silent for so long, even though I have liked you for a long time. I can't imagine a better wife and mother for Fiona than you, Alyssa. You don't know what you are worth. Clever, beautiful, honest, sincere. You can't find anyone like that nowadays. Be my wife. Shall we go right now and get married? Do you mind? And then we'll go to the jewelry store and pick out engagement rings. And keep in mind, you can't get away with a fancy wedding. I want everyone to see how lucky I am and be jealous of my happiness." Alice was dumbfounded, but absolutely happy. It seemed that someone above had heard and fulfilled, as if by magic, all her deepest desires. It was incredible. Not long ago, she was crying in the park with helplessness and eating a penny bun with milk, weaving home to an empty room, and no one needed her, and no one needed her. And now she would be a wife and a mommy, a homemaker, had a favorite job. What more could she dream of? It was said and done. John bought the mansion, made repairs there, and the whole family moved in to live there. Soon there was a fancy wedding, and Alice became his lawful wife. She proudly led Fiona to the guests and introduced her, "Our daughter, Fiona." The best girl in Fiona, the child really looked like an angel, in a snow-white dress and bright red curls. There was no problem with the custody arrangement, and 2 months later Fiona was John and Alice's daughter. Megan was worried at first that she wouldn't be able to get acclimated in a strange place, but in vain. She loved it in her new home. It gave her a second wind. Now she enthusiastically grew seedlings in the greenhouse and bred new varieties of cucumbers. She also bought seeds by mail and planted roses. The woman was so carried away by this business that the days flew like an arrow. She had no time to be bored, and the sicknesses frightened her and began to bypass her. The child in the yard was also free. She was allowed to get a German Shepherd dolly, and now a happy Fiona trained her to her utmost and taught her commands. The businessman equipped the child with a swing and a playground. Sociable and spontaneous Fiona got accustomed at once, met and made friends with the neighbor girl Lisa, and they became friends and went to visit each other. John and Alice did not live happily ever after. It took a long time to adapt to each other, to learn to respect each other's wishes, to give in, to make the first steps towards reconciliation, and soon family life got on well. One day, the man had a strange dream. His first love, Betty, was sitting in a chair near his headboard, looking lovingly at him. She was still wearing her favorite blue dress with ruffles, her hair arranged in a beautiful hairdo. It was all so real, He could even feel her breathing, and not believing his eyes, he whispered, "Bethy, how are you here? How beautiful you are." She put her finger to her lips, showing a sign of silence, and just as quietly and peacefully answered, "I am not here. You are just sleeping. I came to tell you something important for a moment. John, I forgive you. Thank you for Fiona. You're doing the right thing. Alice is a wonderful mother, and soon she'll give you a son. You'll see. Name him Wayne." And she vanished, just as quietly and imperceptibly, like a vision, leaving only the faintest scent of lavender. John jumped up and down on the bed, as if he'd been scalded. His heart was pounding, and he was drenched in sweat. He stared around in confusion, wondering what was happening. Dream or reality? A sleepy Alice rubbed her eyes and asked, frightened, "Cute, what happened? Are you sick? Something hurts? Or a bad dream?" The man looked at his gentle Snow White. She was so cute with disheveled blonde hair, held her tightly to him and whispered, "I was wondering if we should have an heir. How do you look at it?" Alice sleepily smiled, kissed her husband, and whispered to him, "You suggest we do it right now. I do not mind." And the couple of newlyweds sank into the abyss of tenderness and passion. John, as promised, put a fancy monument on Betty's grave and landscaped the area around it. He often went with Fiona himself to visit his first love, and every time he never tired of telling her, "Thank you." After all, it was her part, Fiona, became the meaning of his lonely life, the light in the window, looking at this red-haired miracle. He always remembered Betty. Thanks to a chance meeting with the baby, the man finally found such long-awaited happiness, a strong family, and in his soul there was peace and tranquility. Let it be. Alice successfully combined the role of businesswoman and wife, hostess and mother. It seemed that the flow of her energy will never end. On the contrary, she was only happy about it all. Taking her daughter to school in the morning, feeding the whole family for breakfast, seeing her husband off to work. She felt important and needed. She knew that they loved her, waited for her at home. And that was the most important thing. Now the orphanage and loneliness, a hard childhood and Hurt's mother seemed to have dropped into the past and were in some other parallel life. And not with her at all. Alice was able to let go of all the negativity and enjoy her happiness now. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.